Airplane was initially meant to be quite a different spoof to the one we eventually got. The original idea for it was basically as a spoof within a spoof, adapted from a stage show that writer-directors Jim Abrahams and Jerry and David Zucker would perform called Kentucky Fried Theatre. And as part of that, they would parody adverts and TV shows at the time, and the idea for the film was that fake adverts would be the centre of it, with the thing linking them being that they appeared during a broadcast of a late-night, low-budget B-movie disaster flick. And eventually, when that aspect kept having more jokes and details added, Airplane began to take shape with an actual narrative. And Kentucky Fried Movie would become a thing in 1977, directed by John Landis, and it was more of a series of sketches spoofing different film genres and styles at the time, and Airplane would largely be focusing on the one disaster film. And it was partway through writing the script that the Zaz team effectively realised that they weren't just borrowing from a disaster film called 0 Hour, which I've seen and is pretty much exactly what you would expect. It is 1950s black and white pure disaster movie cheese. But they weren't just borrowing from it, they were beat for beat remaking it. They had some of the same key events, some of the exact same lines of dialogue, word for word. Realised that, quickly got the rights to effectively remake the film just to avoid any trouble, and continued writing. And effectively, they were pointing out the ridiculousness of some of the scenarios and events in the seriousness of these films. The key plot point involving fish served causing a mass food poisoning amongst the passengers and pilots, that's from 0 Hour. And in some cases, they're treated with exactly the same sense of seriousness or looked at in the same way, but because they're surrounded by comedy, the humour comes through. And on paper, it doesn't work. It absolutely does not work. And the studio saw this, and they were worried for the film. How would they market this? How would it turn out? Would it be funny? Is it meant to be funny? And some of the cast were as well. Peter Graves read the script and apparently threw it in the bin thinking it was nonsense. And it was only when his wife and daughter fished it out and read it themselves that they insisted he star in it, and he agreed to do so. And then the first day of filming came along. And that was when any studio worries were quickly wiped away, and some of the cast as well. Because the very first thing they shot was Surely You Can't Be Serious. And it was at that moment the studio saw what the film was going for and let the filmmakers just go ahead and make it in pure deadpan fashion. And the cast weren't told to play it straight, they were told play it like you don't know you're in a comedy. And that's where so much of the success and humour of Airplane comes through. The fact that a good deal of it still feels as if it could be in a genuine, serious B-movie just adds to the absurdity, and it's something that particularly helped Leslie Nielsen, who had some of his most notable, not just comedic roles, but just roles in general, follow on from his career-making turn in this film. You know, a man who, after this, would star in multiple spoof films, of course most notably The Naked Gun, but was beforehand known for his dramatic and sci-fi roles. But apparently, even in the years before this, he would tend to prank people on sets. He did it quite a bit on the set of Airplane, apparently. If you look at interviews with him on YouTube, apparently he did this just in general conversations and when meeting people. He'd carry a fart machine around with him wherever he went and just let it off, keeping the same serious expression on his face as if nothing was happening. And I think that one of the things that helps Airplane the most is the fact that it has a specific target. As I've mentioned, 0 Hour. Yes, it winds in references to the Airport franchise, which was happening at the time, and Saturday Night Fever, and even a coffee advert from the time where they got the same two people from the advert to effectively reprise their roles for two jokes in a film. And, you know, even today, over 40 years on, in another country, those jokes still manage to be funny, and I think in part because of that follow-up gag. But what helps it is there's still a narratively largely linking to one film. You know, these films are at their best, I believe this, when instead of just having endless crossovers where characters from the likes of Ted and Avatar scream at each other on the Starship Enterprise, as most spoof films since Scary Movie have done, they're at their best when they have that narrative. And yes, Airplanes is kind of thin, it acknowledges that, but it at least still goes from point A to point B pretty directly. And these films are best when they do that. It's why I think that Walk Hard is the closest thing we've had to a Zaz film at their peak in the years since. And that disaster narrative has every moment, every frame wrung for all the jokes they could possibly have. Watching the film with the commentary, I did that just before this screening. The Zaz guys sit there and they pretty much say the whole time, that's a joke that never got a laugh, no one ever laughed at this in screenings, that's a joke that I really liked but nobody enjoyed, I don't get why people laughed at this. At consistently laugh out loud funny lines, and maybe they just didn't hear the laughter because it was overlapping with that from the previous gag about 5 seconds before, but regardless, there is so much in Airplane that, yes, even after being endlessly quoted over the decades since, still gets a laugh. And it also manages to still bring up jokes that you've not noticed or heard before after multiple rewatches. I cannot wait to finally see this with an audience, and particularly on the big screen. Thank you so much everyone for coming along. I hope that those of you who haven't seen the film before really enjoy it. Please sit back, relax, and maybe go for the lasagna instead. Airplane.